Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News Weekend. The Trudeau government says it wants to reach a deal that will satisfy all Indigenous families that have been shortchanged by the child welfare system. But it has set up a very tight timeline to achieve such an ambitious goal. APTN's Fraser Needham explains.
Canada filed an appeal late Friday afternoon, challenging a decision that would see billions flow to Indigenous families affected by the child welfare system. That appeal seeks to overturn the court decision which upheld the findings of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. It required the government to compensate all Indigenous families who have had children taken into care as a result of underfunding, paying them up to $40,000 per family and retroactive to 2006. Justice Minister David Lametti says the appeal will allow the parties to work on bigger things.
We're here putting the appeal on ice, so putting it in abeyance precisely because we think we can arrive at a solution that's comprehensive and global, that includes not only what the CHRT was trying to do, but also touches the 2 and now 3 class actions, as well as putting the long-term reform in place.
Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu says the government wants to make sure all Indigenous families are fairly compensated and no child is left behind.
We want to work with the parties to make sure that we get to the end goal, which is to compensate people who have been harmed and to create a better system, an equitable system, a compassionate system, so that no more harm is done.
The only problem is that the government has a very small window to get such a major deal in place. They want a signed agreement by the end of the year. Kim Bodin of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples says he is not sure they can do it.
Unless they're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I don't know. I don't know if they can even reach that because, yeah, there'll be some tough negotiations, and I hope our leaders do the right thing and ensure that they protect and our children, our Indigenous children. I hope they do that.
So far, the Liberals have been vague on how much they are willing to spend or how they will fix a child welfare system that has been broken for decades. I'm Fraser Needham, APTN News, Ottawa.
To Alberta now, where members of the Beaver Lake Cree Nation are preventing their chief and council from accessing the band office. They're calling for more financial transparency. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
On October 20th, band members erected a teepee on the grounds of the Beaver Lake Cree Nation band office and have been occupying here since. They're taking the rare step of blocking the access to the band office from leadership. Dozens of members have occupied the space. Evan Travis Cardinal is a band member. He told APTN that leadership has mismanaged funds and wants to know where oil and gas royalties have gone from leasing land. He also wants to know why the nation's detox center has closed.
So the band has no information on what's going on with the reservation and what's coming in the reservation. According to our finances, we don't know. And that's why the people got together, the band members of Beaver Lake Cree Nation.
Vernon Leonard-Gladue says lack of communication and not having a band meeting for 2 years is unacceptable.
They have told us over and over, if you guys want some stuff, come and ask us, and they'll give it to us. And we've been through that. Phone the administrator, they don't return calls. How can we get that stuff without being, responded to?
APTN spoke to Chief Jermaine Anderson over the phone. She declined to comment on the situation. On Beaver Lake's social media, she and council posted a statement saying the COVID pandemic has made it difficult to properly communicate. It also says there were incidences of hate speech and threats of violence towards leadership. Chief Anderson sent APTN a statement on Friday, reading in part. One immediate consequence is that the nation is unable to conduct its ordinary business, including issuing income support checks to approximately 56 vulnerable nation members, issuing support payments to the nation's 12 post-secondary students, paying wages to certain employees, and making payments to certain contractors. Chief and council sent an injunction to stop the gathering and allow access. Cardinal says, for now, they won't follow that injunction.
All we want to do is come up with a resolution where everybody benefits equally from our reservation and to have no favoritism going on in our reservation.
Last week, membership said they wanted to meet with band members to end the standoff, but so far, no meetings are planned. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Beaver Lake Cree Nation.
Well, as the fourth wave of the pandemic continues, First Nations across the country are still being affected. In Manitoba, case numbers remain high, and it's now recommended that First Nations, Métis, and Inuit get a third vaccine dose. With more, here's Daryl Stranger.
First Nations people here in the province of Manitoba, both on and off reserve, make up more than half of the total COVID-19 case count. Now, the Manitoba Pandemic First Nations Response Coordination Team has released statistics regarding COVID-19 in each tribal council area. Now, as tribal councils continue to fight the spread of the fourth wave, the numbers are still quite high. Out of 7 tribal councils in Manitoba, many are seeing active cases in the double digits. Now, for instance, the Swampy Cree Tribal Council has seen over 2,200 cases since the pandemic began, and they still have 136 active cases. Now, in northern Manitoba, Four Arrows Regional Health Authority recorded 1,900 cases, and they currently have 13 active in that area. Now, First Nations not part of a tribal council in the province have seen a combined 1,800 cases since the pandemic began, and there are 41 confirmed cases in those First Nations. Now, the Manitoba government also announced this week that all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people 18 and over are eligible for a third dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Now, the province is recommending that people wait at least 6 months since they had their last dose to receive the third. Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
To BC now, where Williams Lake Mayor Walter Cobbs is still under fire from First Nations leaders and even his own city council, after he recently shared a post about residential schools on his Facebook page. Well, as it turns out, the mayor has come under fire before for his comments about Indigenous peoples. APTN's Tina House has more on that story.
Demands for the Williams Lake mayor's resignation continue. It started when the mayor shared a post stating that there is another side to residential schools and that Indigenous people want to be victims. On November the 2nd, at a city council meeting, City Councillor Jason Ryle spoke publicly to the mayor.
You attempted to defend an indefensible position, and I'm disappointed that the work that we as council and staff have done in working towards reconciliation feels like it's all but undone with a quick click of a share.
And this isn't the first time that Mayor Cobb has been heard speaking in a racist tone. Back in 2010, APTN interviewed Walter Cobb, who was at the time the president of the local Chamber of Commerce. This is what Walter Cobb had to say about Indigenous people back then.
They don't want to work, and they don't want, in some cases, some of those leaders don't appear to not want the people on their reserves to work or prosper.
The Tsilhqot'in national government has brought to light a social media post from Walter Cobb that reads, "My mother-in-law used to say that if it was shitty weather, let the Indians have it." Although the mayor has apologized for sharing the post about residential schools, Tsilhqot'in National Government Chair Chief Joe Alphonse is not having it.
It's not the first time. This is he's had a long history of singling out First Nation people, and it's time to hold him accountable. And that's why we don't accept his the apology. That wasn't very sincere. We want him to still resign, and it's up to his council to step up to that plate.
Back at the city council meeting, Councillor Ryle continued to let the mayor know how he felt about his actions.
I am equally disappointed that this is another misstep in a pattern of behavior that is either hurtful, misplaced, or inconsiderate of those whom you're trying to represent. Whether it's public art displays or comments around Indigenous issues, your pattern of behavior of speaking first and thinking after has put us on the back foot too many times. I'm tired of it.
There has been an online petition started that has just about exceeded 1,000 signatures asking for his resignation. However, Mayor Cobb remains in office. We requested an interview with him, but we didn't hear back by the time this story went to air. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Time for a quick break, but coming up, one last story from the Governor General's trip to Germany, and it's not one you'll want to miss. Stick around. Welcome back. In British Columbia, protests over old-growth logging have lasted more than a year now, and the BC government says they're going to be working with First Nations to defer the cutting of 2.6 million hectares of old-growth forests. In a press release, the province stated the deferrals are a temporary measure. They have shared maps of the deferred areas with land title holders and are requesting the nations respond in 30 days if they support the deferrals in their territories. The Union of BC Indian Chiefs says the deferrals are a political move and old-growth logging continues in the province.
The permits are in place and logging will continue in the foreseeable future at the same rate it has in the past, which is devastating. What the province has done, in essence, is defer the deferrals. They've punted this issue down the road. They've dumped it in the laps of First Nations.
Well, it's time now for our final report on the Governor General's recent state visit to Germany. Except this time we're not talking about Mary May Simon herself, but about the object she went to see. As Lindsay Richardson explains, one German museum is hoping to undo the stereotypes, feeding the country's passion for First Nations culture.
The totem pole is an icon of Northwest Coast First Nations. They depict the stories and deeds of families and clans, or the missing and murdered, sometimes symbolizing reconciliation or nation-to-nation solidarity against land exploitation. Though it's strange to spot them across the country in the east, stranger still spotting them 8,000 kilometers and an ocean away, here in Berlin, where two coastal totem poles are the featured items of a North American pavilion set to open at the Humboldt Forum in 2022. The red cedar totem poles have been in storage for more than 30 years. The origins of one still a mystery.
We don't know anything about the producer or any owner. What we think is that it was commissioned by a British trader, Robert Cunningham, and that it maybe was already adapted to European tastes.
The second was purchased by a renowned explorer who brought more than 3,000 coastal items back to Germany.
The collector, Adrian Jacobsen, traveled in the 1880s the west coast of Canada, and on Haida Gwaii he bought this bowl from the brother of the first owner, Chief Stilter, and it was carved by the quite renowned artist Charles Edenshaw.
Jacobsen shelled out close to $65 for the pole back in 1881. Adjusted for inflation, that means close to $1,800 in today's money. To Zesnik, their value far exceeds their ticket price.
If you compare it with costs for logistics or transport, it was much, much less.
Especially in Germany, where First Nations items are upheld as cultural curiosities. A passion for Indigenous culture has persisted here for nearly 150 years, thanks to one man, Karl May, Germany's most read author, creator of Winnetou, a fictional Apache warrior, star of the 1960s films of the same name.
Mein weißer Vater verlangt viel von Winnetou.
Except Mai never visited the Old West, and today his much-beloved character reads like a caricature.
There are very different cultures, different languages, different cultural production, and I think that's very important to teach.
There's a German word for this phenomena. In English, it translates to Indian enthusiasm. Thanks to Mai, it's rooted in stereotypes. Just ask international hoop dancer Dallas Arcand, Cree, whose community is in Treaty 6 territory.
You know, I'm a mixed breed, like a lot of us are. I've experienced that in my previous experience in Europe, I was accused of being an imposter, and they didn't think I was Indigenous, and they asked me why I have colored eyes, and because I didn't look like our ancestors, like Sitting Bull or anything like that. The big thing, though, is I like to bring people to the 2021 of what it is to be Indigenous.
Zesnik agrees.
I mean, it's not only cultures with feathers and poles.
Museums have an important role to play in education. During her time in Germany, Governor General Mary May Simon toured several exhibits featuring First Nations and Inuit historical items. She acknowledged Germany's work towards reconciliation in an interview with APTN.
When I met with leaders, we had an opportunity to talk to each other about some of the initiatives that we have to undertake to address the wrongs of the past. And we've also talked about how difficult it is to talk about these issues. And you know, the president of Germany told me that he goes every day to an event that addresses reconciliation. And as Governor General, I hope I'll be able to do that as well.
In museums, this means modernizing narratives. Though well respected in his time, Jakobsen, who brought the totem poles to Berlin, also recruited First Nations and Inuit families for Germany's turn-of-the-century ethnological exhibits, better known today as human zoos.
We will kind of have counter-narratives to Jakobsen's 19th century perspective as a collector who was collecting in times of European colonialism, and then having perspectives of First Nations representatives from today. I'm still learning, and we hope that these processes of transcultural cooperation will go on.
Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Berlin.
Quite a story. Well, time for another quick break, but we've got music and beating coming up. Stick around. Welcome back. A Yukon artist is transforming the granny hanky, and she's using her own beading and a little bit of technology to do so as well. Here's Sarah Connors with that story.
Kaylin Baker is trading needle and thread for an iPad and a stylus, putting a new spin on an age-old accessory.
So this is kind of a nod to that.
This hanky is part of a new line of Indigenous granny hankies. They feature blown-up images of Baker's beadwork, like this hanky.
Isolated the fireweed from a previous purse, or the hummingbird.
Baker says she got the idea for hankies while working on a project for a Canada Council grant earlier this summer. After ordering some online, she says she was amazed by how good they looked.
It turned out so well, and like the colors really came through, and I just like, it was real. Like I thought like this could happen. I'm gonna try.
1 month in, Baker has already had 300 orders, some from as far away as New Mexico. Even Indigenous influencers like Peachsicle on TikTok are sporting her designs.
The fact that people, you know, love it, it just makes me feel really, really great.
She says it's a tedious process to create a hanky. Each design takes around 10 hours to complete.
I think that doing all that beadwork for all these years kind of really like prepared me like mentally, and just like to be able to sit there all day and isolate one bead at a time.
The process starts with Baker taking photos of completed beadwork. Using her iPad, she separates the beadwork from the background, then plans the design of the hanky. While it's more technology-focused than traditional beading, Baker says the creative process is similar.
It does take a long time, and it is very special to me, and each piece is like has its own story.
Baker hopes to eventually integrate artwork from elders and youth in her home community of Pelly Crossing into the hankies.
There's so many talented artists from Pelly Crossing, and if I could just kind of like help give back in that way, like I would really love to do that and to help out.
She's collaborating with other Indigenous entrepreneurs like Yukon Soaps Company, which will use an upcoming hanky design for soap packaging. With more requests for orders rolling in, Baker is excited to see where the hanky business takes her.
It's been amazing to see like how much of a impact it makes on people when it's just something that, you know, I just sit here and do.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Incredible work. Well, a young talent in Alberta is turning heads with songs she has performed and written herself. APTN's Chris Stewart talks to singer-songwriter Amanda Gendron.
You said it's all for me. What the hell does that mean? To feel my heart.
Amanda Gendron has been fascinated by music since she was little. The 22-year-old Cree Nation singer plays guitar, piano, writes and sings her own songs.
As a kid, I've always wanted to kind of be a performer, and I was always basing my life around that. And then my parents kind of saw that as an opportunity to invite me to play piano, guitar, sing, and ever since then it kind of stuck.
And her skills are paying off. She's getting some radio play and has songs on streaming platforms. She is performing her new song called Physical today, coming out in January.
It's a very vulnerable song as well, very powerful, and I'm very proud of it. So I'm very excited to share that with everybody. I do have a single right now. It's called Light. It's out on all streaming platforms. I made that when I was quite younger, but I am very proud of it.
I was so happy.
Jack Cooper is a longtime talent developer. He says Amanda has that it factor that is rare.
There are many singers who are good singers, but they don't know how to put a song across. They don't live their song, and Amanda does. You feel the song completely while she's singing the whole thing. And so, yes, she's probably one of the best we've ever had.
Amanda says she classifies herself as acoustic pop, and she writes songs that make you feel.
It's just a very ballad kind of, that's kind of what I like to sing, very emotional, very soul. Anything that kind of makes like the hairs off your skin like go up. That's definitely how I like to express my music.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Sherwood Park, Alberta.
Great sound. Well, that's all the time we have for your APTN National News this weekend. For news anytime, you can visit our website. That's aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks so much for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.